In 1870, the unification of Italy was completed. The French were driven from Rome by the Italian Piedmontese monarchy, and the long-awaited Risorgimento, the rebirth of Italy, was brought to its end. Before this, the name Italy was like a geographic expression, just a phrase encompassing a dozen or so unrelated kingdoms, papal states, duchies. After the Roman Empire fell 14 centuries earlier, Italy was divided into smaller and smaller regions with divergent dialects and cultures, which made communication difficult. Even when Italy was at the forefront of the art world during the Renaissance, Niccolò Machiavelli warned Italian people that their leaders would be unable to protect them from centralized neighboring countries in his controversial book, The Prince. As the nations in Europe that surrounded Italy grew in political and economic vitality, Italy fell. The world was modernizing, utilizing techniques developed during the Industrial Revolution, and adopting nationalist philosophies, and those that didn't adapt with it weakened. Many Italians of the working class and some elites believed unification and administrative modernization was the only logical course of action in the interest of Italy's survival, and so the Risorgimento became a popular movement. When this rebirth was finally carried to completion in 1870, however, it looked nothing like its supporters imagined. Known as the flawed unification of Italy, the Risorgimento resulted in Piedmontese control, which not even Italy's new Piedmontese king foresaw. Much of Italy remained unstable afterwards. Although the nation now centered around a king, Italy's southern territories in particular were destitute and underdeveloped, and classes were divided by large margins, as they had always been. The vast majority of Italians remained illiterate, and Italian elites in the north didn't understand the speech of the average Italian citizen in the south. Although Italy struggled politically and economically before and after the unification, what endured were its cultural treasures, which transcended communicative boundaries of language and class. What endured was art. It was education and empowerment that anyone could and wanted to understand. It only makes sense, then, that a story like Pinocchio should come out of Collodi, Italy in the 19th century. To the writer of Pinocchio, education was a cause of utmost concern. Collodi is a town built into the mountains west of Florence. In the 19th century, it was home to the Garzani family and their grand villa, which housed the noble family and their guests. Behind that villa was a humble town where workers and servants of the Garzani family lived. Carlo Lorenzini was born to a seamstress of the Garzani family and a cook for the Marquis of Florence. They were working-class individuals, and life was exceedingly difficult for them during the 19th century. Carlo was the eldest of the couple's 10 children, and in the latter years of the 1830s, in just the span of 4 months, 4 of Carlo's younger siblings died. Only 4 of the 10 children lived to adulthood. Although he was born in Florence, Carlo spent most of his childhood in Collodi with his mother's family. It was here that he was inspired to take Carlo Collodi as his pen name. In a Florentine bookstore and publishing house, Carlo met many peers who were, at the time, involved with the Risorgimento, and became a passionate believer in the cause alongside them. He devoted himself to political writing in his satirical newspaper The Street Lamp, and again in The Controversy, after the first was shut down by the Grand Duchy of Tuscany. Education was an important political cause to Carlo, and would play a large part in the story of his mischievous puppet. In his open letter, Bread and Books, he argued that the greatest combatant to Italy's poverty and division would be the education of the Italian people. However, after the precarious unification of Italy resulted in a kingdom rather than a republic, which left the nation in a similar state as it began, Carlo took to writing children's stories instead. It was in 1882 that he would create the first iteration of his masterwork, titled The Story of a Puppet, in the children's newspaper. In the Smithsonian article, The Real Story of Pinocchio Tells No Lies, author Perry Klass wrote, quote, "Collodi never had children of his own. Perhaps he simply never wanted to settle down, or perhaps he didn't want to start a family because he'd watched 6 of his younger siblings die in childhood. It was only in the world of Pinocchio that he had the power to bring dead children back to life." There's a plaque outside the apartment where Collodi died at the age of 63, praising him for using his wit and artistic sensibilities was to carry out his life's true goal, to educate the people of United Italy. In the end, Collodi changed his country not by publishing adult polemics, but by speaking directly to the nation's children, as the plaque puts it, with tender, bitter, viral imagination. These days, the town of Collodi is hardly visited for its noble villa. Now, Collodi is like a monument to Pinocchio, a page out of the book brought to life. Among restaurants and taverns named after its characters, statues honoring the original story, and, of course, many souvenir shops, Collodi has become the perfect tourist destination, all thanks to Pinocchio. The statue park in Collodi, which honors the book, was funded by children the world over, and the President of Italy himself attended its grand opening in 1956. Despite this, Pinocchio was hardly a global hit during Collodi's lifetime. The book was successful, of course, but not to the same degree it is now. As of 2024, Pinocchio has had countless adaptations and cameos in film, literature, and television, and nearly a century and a half after the book's initial iteration in the children's newspaper, Pinocchio is still receiving accolades and recognition. In 2022, Guillermo del Toro released an adaptation of the book for cinemas. In the same year, Disney released its live-action adaptation of their animated Pinocchio from the 1940s. Also in the year 2022, the infamous trailer for Pinocchio: A True Story was unleashed upon the internet, to the subsequent, quote, yassification of the character. I'm sure you, dear viewer, also know of Pinocchio, and especially of his lying and his growing nose. Even the lying emoji, added to phones worldwide in 2016, is a reference to Collodi's beloved character. The original Disney cartoon is, of course, the most widely known adaptation of Pinocchio. There are probably people out there who don't know Pinocchio ever was a book, and it was in the cartoon that the character's lying became his most iconic trait. However, in the original story of Pinocchio, lying is only one part of a greater whole. The book was originally meant to be just 15 chapters before readers asked for the story to continue, and only after those original 15 chapters does the concept of telling lies and growing noses come into play. Even still, it only happens in very few inconsequential moments, meaning when Carlo Collodi set out to write Pinocchio, what the story has now come to be associated with was hardly its moral imperative. The original intent of Pinocchio has been simplified at best and lost at worst. Much like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, the character of Pinocchio has been obscured by time and fame. Of course, Pinocchio hasn't been distorted to the same extent as Frankenstein, which found itself in the unique position of its character's very names being misconstrued. Still, one has to wonder if this type of success would have satisfied the writers of the original stories. Their work attained such global recognition and iconography, their legacies forever burned into pop culture, that it came at the expense of a broader understanding of what their stories really meant when they were written. Lies of P is an action RPG released in September of 2023. It was made by the South Korean development studios Round 8 and NeoWiz. Previously, Round 8 Studio was known for their work on, basically nothing? Google tells me they worked on a game called Bless Unleashed with the company Valofi in 2020. Raise your hand if you know what that is. But really, Lies of P is this team's maiden work, and what a first attempt it is. Lies of P is a Souls-like. The term Souls-like refers to games inspired by the formula of From Software's video game series Dark Souls. The games are known for crushing difficulty, guided by checkpoint-based level progression, and an upgrade system usually punished upon in-game death. This includes games ranging from Hexworks' Lords of the Fallen, released in the same year as Lies of P, all the way to the 2D Metroidvania Hollow Knight. Souls-like is a genre I've always eagerly avoided, with the exception of From Software's own iterations and the aforementioned Hollow Knight, and I've never felt like I was missing anything by doing so. So when the gameplay trailer for Lies of P released, I was unconcerned. No one can do it as well as FromSoft. Even they can stumble because of the precarious balance of this genre, so why bother? A few months ago, in November, however, Joseph Anderson uploaded a video singing Lies of P's praises, and it motivated me to give the game a try. Having now played it 3 times, I can confidently say I pretty much agree with his review wholesale, with negligible exceptions. Like Jiminy being annoying.
What the hell?
Well, Gemini was annoying.
Oh my god, young man, kill yourself!
So, for the super nitty-gritty gameplay details that I won't get into here, I have to recommend that video. Please give it a watch if you want a solid, story spoiler-free recommendation of Lies of P, or if you've already played and enjoyed the game and want to listen to someone put your thoughts into words. It's a really great video. I wish I could script like that man. The closest thing I've got is his upload schedule, apparently. Speaking of, I couldn't go a new video without thanking you all for the support last time. I never expected to beat my previous record so quickly, much less by a quarter shy of 100,000 views. I'm happy to see such insightful conversation being held in the comments section, and had a wonderful time reading and replying to your thoughts and jokes. I would have liked to shout out my favorite comments, but I had too many, so here's a collage instead. Rest assured that I read all of them. I hope I can continue to inspire such passionate examinations of the things we consume, and that I can do so with your support. Thank you. Anyway, a big part of why I was so cynical about Lies of P, beyond my usual lack of enthusiasm for Souls-likes, was its inspiration. Bear in mind I hadn't read Pinocchio at this point, which Lies of P is, if you haven't picked up on it by now, based on. It was because of its source material that I thought the game was, frankly, going to be cringe. I wrongly assumed Lies of P was trying to be mindlessly edgy for the sake of shock value in the contrast to its source material, which is commonly done to kids' content these days. But when I gave the game a try, I loved it so much that it inspired me to actually read Pinocchio and study up on my Italian history in order to understand the original story and the references within the game. Lies of P obviously includes elements of lying, possibly to make its connection to Pinocchio more readily apparent to modern audiences, but I believe the game takes its themes multiple steps further than that. Steps in a direction toward the true intent of the original tale. Lies of P is interested in themes beyond a simple but effective honesty is good, or even the more controversial sometimes lies are okay. Instead, Lies of P views our human condition through the lens of communication, be it truthful or deceitful. What does humanity look like without the need for communication or miscommunication? What is free will? At what point does this cease to be human? And at what point does one become human? How Lies of P achieves this throughout the story, the gameplay, and how it all cleverly relates to the moral of the original tale is what I'll be exploring in this video. If you've ever attempted to read an old children's tale, you might agree that they're often wild and illogical to the point of confusion. Pinocchio is one such children's tale, but I both started and finished the book thinking it was written timelessly, in a way anyone could enjoy. It's similar to other fairy tales, like those of the Brothers Grimm, in that things just sort of happen with minimal world building or foreshadowing, and for no other reason than to more strongly convey the moral of the story while keeping things exciting for its target audience. Even still, Pinocchio's text is cohesive and packed with meaning. Its humor and morals can be appreciated by adults as well as children. Pinocchio is harshly punished by the book's cruel world for being lazy, stubborn, and selfish, and is rewarded for working hard and listening to the adults in his life who care about him. He begins the book as a picky eater and learns not to be frugal when his long journey leaves him hungry. He starts his adventure playing hooky and following predatory advice for quick cash, and ends it having learned the values of hard work and education. The story of Lies of P has almost nothing to do with any of the surface level events of Pinocchio. As Yahtzee so eloquently put it in his episode of Zero Punctuation featuring the game,
and all that's just name changes. We could have respectively named these characters Basil, Manuel, and Polly, and just as credibly argued that the game is based on faulty towers.
Of course, sitting here scripting this video, I have to disagree with the sentiment, but I can't say it doesn't appear that way, and it's very funny, as always. In Lies of P, the familiar characters' roles are flipped on their heads when compared to their book counterparts. Geppetto is neglectful and manipulative instead of the reliable father who's always right. The Blue Fairy is the damsel in need of saving rather than Pinocchio's savior. Romeo is Pinocchio's beacon of truth and justice, instead of the bad influence he is in the book, and this game's version of Pinocchio himself must learn to disobey his father, which the book so vehemently disincentivizes, in order to protect himself. From their characters to their tone and target audience, these two stories are almost like mirror images. So how could Lies of P possibly preserve the intent of Pinocchio within this? The Florentine lecturer Anna Krachina and British journalist John Hooper are responsible for the most recent translation of Pinocchio, released in September of 2021. In an interview with La Voce di New York, Anna Krachina said, quote, "Everyone thinks Pinocchio is a children's story about a bratty liar whose nose grows longer with each lie. That lying is bad, and what can happen to you if you lie. But that's not what Pinocchio is about at all. It's a social commentary, often satirical." In translating the book, the two hoped to let everyone know what Pinocchio is really about. According to Hooper, the book encourages readers to, quote, "get educated, get informed, don't let other people pull your strings. That's how you become a human being." There's a message about socialization there that is absolutely fundamental. Although most of the game is antithetical to Pinocchio in practice, what Lies of P honors above all else is the story's core message. Only the trickery isn't just on the part of our puppet protagonist. Lies of P uses its association with Pinocchio to trick its own audience. This flipping of expectations is exactly the point. This is the game's way of interpreting Carlo Collodi's message to a new audience. Things aren't always as they seem.
Close your
It's tradition in Souls-like games to tell the story in vague ways. Rarely will characters or a narrator explain what's going on. It's up to the player to decipher the story based on context clues, the environment, and the brief descriptions that accompany items and artifacts they discover. Similarly, the world of Lies of P is shrouded in mystery, conspiracy, and danger. Much like Pinocchio, Lies of P encourages its version of the mischievous puppet, as well as the player, to uncover these mysteries for themselves. Long before the events of Lies of P, an angel visited the Earth, which would grant immortality to humans. Already, what does this have to do with Pinocchio? Bear with me. The angel, whatever it was torn apart, likely because its very body was the source of immortality. All that was left of this event was a glowing blue substance called ergo and the being's arm. Ages later, an alchemist named Valentinus visited the old fishing village of Krat, where he found mass amounts of ergo in an old underground canyon beneath the village, which was named the Relic of Trismegistus. These ruins were likely where the angel originally fell. At first, ergo appeared worthless, but people called listeners claimed that through the substance they could hear past lives. They discovered ergo was the condensed and refined life force of human beings, their life's essence and memories given form. Perhaps this was the immortality the angel granted them. Valentinus's wife Isabel and their daughter Sophia were listeners, and many of the alchemist's discoveries can be attributed to their abilities. They soon found that not only could listeners understand ergo, they could manipulate it. Ergo is all life, past and present, so it wasn't out of the question that by using listeners, the alchemists could pursue eternal life and the manipulation of time itself. One of their experiments culminated in the discovery of gold coin trees. The petrified remains of listeners used to grow ergo-based panaceas, which take the refined form of gold coin fruit. This is, of course, in reference to the fake miracle the fox and cat promise Pinocchio in the book. They tell him his 4 gold coins will grow into 2,000 if he plants them, just to dig them up and steal them while he waits for them to grow. Only here, in Lies of P, the tree is no lie. The description of the gold coin fruit reads, "This fruit that resembles gold holds miracles, and is thus a precious wonder drug. However, no matter how bewitching a miracle may be, it always comes with a price." Meanwhile, Geppetto, the talented inventor and associate of Valentinus, discovered how productive Ergo was as a source of energy. He devoted himself to the creation of a mechanical heart using Ergo in order to give life to puppets in Krat. Geppetto achieved wild success, and Krat followed soon after. The city made quick advancements from a destitute hamlet to an industrial marvel in mere decades, using Ergo to power infrastructure, ward off sickness, and even as currency. Most importantly, it was used to create their lifelike puppet helpers, and as such, puppets became a cornerstone of everyday life in Krat. From entertainment to construction and policing, puppets are everywhere and everything, and make the city rich. 2 protective systems are put in place in case anything goes wrong with this. Stalkers, talented fighters trained to protect the city and aristocracy of Krat from any threats, and the Grand Covenant. The Grand Covenant is a set of laws meant to be instilled in all puppets at creation to prevent them from harming humans. It was made at the request of an aristocratic engineer named Vanini in response to the infamous puppet serial killer Arlecchino.
First law, all puppets must obey their creator's commands. Second law, a puppet may not harm humans. Third law, a puppet protects and serves humans and the city of Krat. Fourth law, a puppet cannot lie.
Unbeknownst to the rest of Krat, in establishing the Grand Covenant, Geppetto added an extra rule that supersedes all others. The rule states that puppets will prioritize Geppetto's commands, even if they break other existing rules. As the arbiters of Ergo, and by association every advancement in Krat, the alchemists hold major influence over all avenues of the city. The aristocracy of Krat makes backdoor dealings with them and advances their studies of Ergo. The stalkers under the aristocracy are also in their pockets as a result. Even the papacy and religion in Krat, surrounding the Relic's Angel, is influenced by the will of the alchemists. Despite moving in secret and on their own island, separate from but overlooking the city, they are the highest of Krat's elites. In the landmark guides the player finds throughout the city, the investigative journalist Medoro writes, "The Holy Ouroboros, the mark of the alchemists, is fittingly engraved into the alchemist's bridge." This shows that they're not just a powerful, privileged class, but have also donated tremendous amounts of money across the city. Rosa Isabel Street is named after the cultural sponsor Lady Isabel Monod, who is married to the leader of the alchemists. The union of Krat's old families and the organization of alchemists is shown in symbolic form. It's obvious who owns the city of Krat. Even among the alchemists, there are 3 who are, quote, Krat's true masters, a triad of people referred to as a Krat technician, an alchemist, and a stalker. Arlecchino tells us himself he was once a member when he was human, the stalker, and I believe the other 2 refer to Geppetto and Valentinus. This trinity calls to mind the name of the ruins where the angel first fell, Trismegistus. In Greek, this word means thrice greatest. Writing etched on the wall of one trinity room says, "3 create 1, you who open the door, be one with the great ones," meaning these are likely the 3 conspirators who know the fullest truth of Ergo, its origins and its capabilities. But evidently, the group had a falling out, and the 3 went their separate ways with their own ambitions for Ergo. At the beginning of the game, and in the midst of Krat's grandest exhibition of puppetry to the public, puppets go rogue and, in a frenzied state, blindly attack humans. I'm sure everyone predicted this. You have to fight something in a Souls-like, man versus machine, and all that. But it's not just the puppets. Ergo erupts from the ruins beneath Krat, and even from inside humans in what is dubbed the petrification disease, trapping them inside their own bodies as the Ergo hardens on their skin. Any further intervention by the alchemists only turns the infected into horrific beasts. From slums to opera houses, nowhere in the city is safe.
On the bright side, I guess, the whole city of Krat's pretty much like that now. The old town caught up with the new. It's true what they say. A receding tide sinks all boats.
2 forces are now crushing Krat between them. That of the overflowing Ergo, as well as the frenzied puppets. So how could this happen? Why did the Grand Covenant and the Stalkers fail? What caused the slow erosion of order and the sudden eruption of chaos from this city that was once heralded as a land of progress and prosperity? That is indeed the question. The game asks the player to unwind the thread of conspiracy alongside the other characters in order to find the city's path forward, to inform themselves and cut the invisible strings that bind them. Lies of P begins when a puppet comes to life in the boxcar of a train stationed in Krat. This is the player character, and Lies of P's version of Pinocchio. I'll refer to him as such for simplicity's sake, but it's worth noting the name Pinocchio is never used once in Lies of P, even in reference to the puppet the player controls. Instead, the other characters just call him Geppetto's puppet. That said, Pinocchio is called to the safe haven Hotel Krat by Sophia, who speaks to him through Ergo.
Ah, there you are. I've been looking all over for you.
The player fights their way through droves of deadly puppets, only to find themselves locked out of the hotel by a peculiar defense mechanism. Its doors only open to guests who say they're human. Given puppets can't lie, they can't enter without human permission. However, for reasons which the player is unaware of at first, Pinocchio isn't bound by the Grand Covenant. When given the choice, he must lie to enter the hotel.
Who are you? Grand Covenant's fourth law. A puppet cannot lie. Welcome to Hotel Krat.
With this same mechanic, Lies of P presents moral dilemmas to the player throughout the game, which they must respond to with either a lie or the truth. Picking the correct ones will advance Pinocchio's humanity until his springs no longer react, and instead his heart pounds. At first, it appears that lying is always the choice that grants him more humanity, which is in line with what the player believes about the Grand Covenant and what they expect from the tale of Pinocchio, but this expectation is soon flipped on its head. After they meet the main cast in Hotel Krat, the player is sent to rescue Geppetto, from whom the game labels a mad stalker. When they find him, this stalker is shouting from the rooftops that Geppetto was responsible for the puppet frenzy. Despite this, Pinocchio kills the stalker and takes his first human life, without question. For the player, a seed of doubt is planted here, but seeing as there's no attempt on Pinocchio's part to question Geppetto, he's Pinocchio's doting father and the renowned inventor of Krat, after all, this gut feeling goes unaddressed for a long time. The player then follows something of a formula from here on. Geppetto tells Pinocchio to go do something, to shut down a factory or liberate a town, and he does it, no matter who or what he must kill in the process. It seems obvious. Why shouldn't you want to stop these things hurting humans? We have two end goals in particular: to defeat the King of Puppets, who everyone speculates is the source of the frenzy, as well as to stop the alchemist's new leader, Simon Manus. After Valentinus faced a sudden death at the hands of the petrification disease, Simon took his place and began making monsters out of those afflicted with ergo. It's on this arduous journey to liberate Krat that Pinocchio meets other characters with notable ties to the book, and where he's taught to think and act for himself in little ways. This journey is what teaches Pinocchio the value of learning, of education. In the book, the fox and cat are thieves and killers. They trick Pinocchio in order to rob him of his gold coins. At first, they appear unchanged when, in the game, the stalker duo tricks Pinocchio into giving them ergo and abandons him midway through the dangerous streets of the Malum district. However, the player soon learns the fox and cat in Lies of P are themselves being extorted in exchange for meager amounts of gold coin fruit. Like many stalkers, they were employed by the alchemists with the hope that the fruit they gave them would keep the cat's petrification disease at bay. The player is given the choice to provide them with the panacea themselves, so they can stop serving the alchemists at the end of the game. In the book, a police dog named Alidoro rescues Pinocchio from a senile fisherman who mistakes the wooden boy for a fish. The dog is described as being honorable. The Alidoro in Lies of P seems to fit this bill as well. He claims he's a legendary stalker and treasure hunter with a philanthropic history. This is supported by the fact that he supplies supplies the player with rare weapons, and that Eugenie, the player's weaponsmith, says he once rescued her in a way similar to the Alidoro in the book. Soon after, however, Pinocchio discovers the stalker is lying about his esteemed identity. In reality, this person killed and replaced the real Alidoro. Pinocchio then works alongside Eugenie to figure out the truth of who this faker is. The game gives the player lots of red herrings where they can choose to lie by omission to spare Eugenie's feelings, but yet again, Pinocchio is encouraged to discover and act on the truth for the fullest reward. In the book, the Blue Fairy is a motherly figure to Pinocchio. She always gets him out of trouble and patiently advises him, even when Pinocchio never listens. When Pinocchio is captured and hanged by the Fox and Cats, where the book was initially meant to end with the puppet's death, it's the Blue Fairy who cuts him from the tree and saves him. Once again, Lies of P's version of the Blue Fairy, Sophia, remains this way. She's the character the player returns to level up, and, like in the book, uses her manipulation of Ergo to revive Pinocchio when the game's combat leaves him broken again and again. Only when the player reaches the end of her story, they learn thus Sophia in the hotel is only an Ergo projection of her real body, which has been captured by Simon and used to collect the Ergo and Krat on the Alchemist's Isle. In a bleak reversal of her role in the book, she asks Pinocchio to find her real body and end her suffering. Through its characters, Lies of P says, just like the book, it's not lying that's most important to this tale. Lying isn't what makes Pinocchio human. Instead, what makes him human is learning more and acting on his knowledge. Eventually, the game stops giving the player black and white, true or false questions at all, and instead presents them with morally gray circumstances which ask for their opinion. Antonia, the aristocratic owner of Hotel Krat, asks if she's still as beautiful as her portrait hung in the hall, despite her age and the petrification disease warping her face. Geppetto asks Pinocchio if he was a trustworthy father. Arlecchino asks Pinocchio if they're human. Like many, I answered all those questions with my own opinion, and still, Pinocchio became human. As the player progresses through the story and is presented with more decisions, so long as they learn more and make their own choices, lies or not, they will arrive at the ending in which Pinocchio becomes human. About halfway through Pinocchio's adventure, he encounters a man who claims he's in love with and married to a puppet, with a wedding ring as evidence. After finding the puppet he's supposedly married to broken in the streets, the player goes about their business without much thought given to the encounter. However, it's soon brought up again. In Hotel Krat, the butler Polendina confesses to Pinocchio that he's in love with Antonia, the only problem being Polendina is a puppet. When Polendina asks if the player has ever met a puppet who loves a human, they're given the option to show him the man's wedding ring and tell him they have. The player is led to think this is an encouraging white lie, and it gives Pinocchio more humanity, but near the end of the game, they're led back to the place where the married puppet lies broken, and another character discovers the puppet's loving confession scrawled on the wall behind her. The player's supposed white lie was actually true. Even the title of the game plays off this expectation. In Korean, the game's original language, the sound P is the word for blood. So although Lies of P intentionally calls to mind the liar Pinocchio everyone is familiar with, its dual meaning, Lies of Blood, paints a different picture after one completes the game. Perhaps out of a genuine trust or just willful ignorance, Geppetto and the circumstances surrounding him are the only hazy details in the game that go largely uninvestigated by Pinocchio.
Hey, check this out. Looks like you, sorta. From a certain angle. No, I'm just kidding. No, it looks exactly like you. I mean, you see it, right? With the nose and the... right?
Although it's not an element in the book, it's common in modern adaptations of Pinocchio that Geppetto is motivated to create his puppet son as a replacement for his real, deceased son. As the player progresses through the game, they learn that Lies of P follows this convention too. The biggest difference is that of Pinocchio's relationship with his father, which is the thematic core of the game. When Pinocchio finally arrives to defeat the king of puppets, Romeo, the player is given their first tangible clue that Geppetto doesn't have Pinocchio's best interest in mind. Due to his distorted speech, which has been censored by Geppetto's secret law, Romeo must communicate this warning in a roundabout way, through a theatrical performance. How Romeo knows this and why he wants to tell Pinocchio is, at this point, beyond the player's knowledge. Despite Romeo's best efforts, however, an ignorant Pinocchio acts on his preconceived notions and attacks him. Throughout their fight, the king shouts and lashes out in frustration. The ordeal is given a notably somber tone. After the player defeats Romeo, they're led through the streets of Krat, where puppets are mourning their king, accompanied by a remorseful accordion piece.
The remaining puppets are leaderless, and we can reclaim the city. But it's still a city beset by the petrification disease. Seek a cure from the alchemists.
This scene stood out to me. It's sad, but the player isn't quite sure why. The song reminds of the feeling of missing out, of isolation, which is exactly what's happening. Neither the player nor Pinocchio knows what they've just done. The use of the accordion here, and throughout Lies of P's soundtrack, is telling. There's a blend of mechanical and human in it that matches the themes of the game. Alongside the distinct, clicky button presses of the accordion, there are moments where it must also pause, as if taking a breath. The composer for Lies of P, OooOooOoo You, said, quote, "As a game music composer, if I were asked about the proudest and most gratifying moment in my career, I wouldn't hesitate to say that it's when players hear the songs and experience a range of emotions without realizing that it's because of the music. If I were to point out the biggest difference between classical composers and media composers, it would be that classical composers create art for themselves, while media composers make music to assist others. Through my music, I aim to help my clients create better works and aid players and audiences in concentrating more on the game or film. In that way, I believe he profoundly succeeded." There are reoccurring elements of the idea of art as wordless communication that permeate Lies of P. Listening to the musical records collected throughout the game is one of the most impactful means to gain humanity. The concept of Romeo trying to circumvent a language barrier, for lack of a better word, through a stage play represents this idea too.
Something transcendent like that makes you feel alive.
I think that idea was something important to Carlo Collodi and the creation of Pinocchio, a tale that transcended class boundaries in 19th century Italy, where much of the population couldn't understand one another. Through Ergo, one can read pure intentions and memories and communicate without misunderstanding. The puppets were operating under this during the frenzy. After Romeo is dead, Vanini uses data collected on Pinocchio's adventure to engineer an Ergo decoder in an attempt to understand the king's jumbled speech and hopefully learn how Krat could prevent another frenzy. With this, Pinocchio finally hears Romeo's message. He hears the truth straight from the source, that Geppetto was behind the frenzy and that Romeo and the other puppets were commanded to attack against their will. Unfortunately, Geppetto isn't there to answer for this. The criminal group and allies of the alchemists, the Black Rabbit Brotherhood, kidnapped him in an act of revenge after Pinocchio killed one of their brothers earlier in the game. So instead, Pinocchio uses the pure, unadulterated memories Ergo carries to find the answers for himself. Through Ergo, he remembers the story of Geppetto's real son. He remembers his story, before he was Pinocchio, and instead was Carlo. After the battle with Romeo, the player finds a necklace on him engraved with the initial C. Upon investigating further, the description of the necklace reads, "The boy resented his father for not showing any interest in him. Perhaps in protest, he gave his graduation necklace to a friend he admired." As a result of Geppetto's obsession with his work, as well as Carlo's apparent lack of a mother, the player learns that Geppetto neglected his son and sent him away to live at the Monad Charity House. The Charity House was an orphanage and boarding school sponsored by Valentinus, where students were trained in the interest of the alchemists to become engineers or stalkers. Carlo was clearly not very happy about this. It's here, however, that he meets his self-proclaimed best friend, Romeo.
Carlo, I hope you can hear me. The laws of the Grand Covenant bind us. First law, all puppets must obey their creator's commands. Law 0. The creator's name is Geppetto. Giuseppe Geppetto.
In the book, Romeo is the closest thing there is to an antagonist of the story, alongside the fox and cat, and perhaps Pinocchio's own stubborn attitude. Romeo is the reason Pinocchio is tricked into going to the infamous land of toys, where he can drown in laziness and gluttony, never working and always playing, and where ultimately they're both turned into donkeys in return for their brief stay. Of course, the player is led to believe Romeo, the king of puppets, is evil in the game, too, but once they learn more...
I'm doing what I can to fend off both the petrification disease and the alchemists. My puppets and I are taking a stand against death itself. That's why I tried sending you messengers. But you got rid of them all. You're still an unstoppable fellow. I remember you. No reason for us to fight, I suppose.
Long before the puppet frenzy, and before either of them were puppets themselves, Carlo and Romeo attended the Monad Charity House together. It's safe to say they spent a lot of time there. Enough time for the two of them to become skilled stalkers, for Carlo's resentment of his father to fester, and for his friendship with Romeo to grow. In the short but pointed interactions we see of the two, Romeo neither binds Carlo to familial obligation, nor stokes his grudge against his father. Instead, he encourages him to appreciate the simple fact that he has blood family, speaking as an orphan. Carlo's strong hatred is just another way for him to be tied to this person he claims he doesn't care about. Romeo tries to help him cut those ties through acceptance and the discovery of people who will give him the companionship his father never did. If his help ever really got through to Carlo, it was unfortunately too late. Seeing the state of the two of them now, it's clear that their ending wasn't a happy one. The two boys' fate, and the fate of Krat itself, is tied to the motives of the alchemist's new leader, Simon, who shares many similarities with Carlo. As a child born into the alchemists, Simon was experimented on by his father to create an artificial listener, which only half succeeded. Simon could read minds and intentions with Ergo, but can't manipulate it. He was deemed a failure and abandoned, but not before he read every cruel thought his father had of him in secret. Just like Carlo, this affected him deeply, only he had no one like Romeo to try and steer him right. Simon became obsessed with the idea of a collective consciousness through Ergo, where no one can hide their secrets, and miscommunication and lies cannot exist. It's likely that Simon killed Valentinus by way of overexposure to Ergo and the contraction of the petrification disease. This attack also killed Carlo and Romeo, and many others in the Monad Charity House. Driven by his ambition, Simon took Valentinus's place as the alchemist's leader and began turning victims afflicted with the petrification disease into Ergo monsters in his attempts to create a hive mind. He believes the Ergo encasing them is a step toward connecting human minds and evolution. For the majority of Liza P, Simon is seen as the primary antagonist. He's also one of a handful of characters for which I struggle to find a correlated character in the book. What he does have is a location to his name. The town of Simple Simons is where Pinocchio was tricked by the fox and cat for his gold coins, and where many other foxes and cats abound. It's also a town full of destitute victims who were tricked by the rich animals. I have to wonder if this common name is the game's way of saying that despite holding a lot of power, Simon and his strange complex is being manipulated by those around him. Geppetto, the alchemists, even his own father, whoever he was, are using him to their own ends. Like Carlo, in his attempt to prove his father wrong, Simon is playing right into his hands, making himself into what he may have deemed a success. The name Manus compounds this too. Meaning hand in Latin, it's as if to say he's the arm acting out the will of a greater body. The same can be said of his self-proclaimed title, the arm of God. Despite his dissidence, even Simon, in his confession found atop the alchemist's aisle, says he thinks a father is like a god to his son. Those ties aren't so easily broken. Following the flare of the petrification disease in the charity house, Geppetto visited the school for the first time, not to see Carlo, but rather to collect his corpse. He hoped to use his son's Ergo, solidified by the disease, to revive him as Krat's first organic puppet. His initial attempt at this failed, however, and left Carlo's body in a bleak state. A nameless, faceless puppet, driven by such a violent emotion, it became too dangerous to keep outside of the briefcase Geppetto carries with him. I think I have to reiterate that because it went right over my head the first time I played the game. This dude carries a dead body around in a briefcase. He's weird for that, man. Geppetto's second attempt at reviving Carlo was much more successful. Given that Ergo is more likely to reawaken when it's placed in a vessel that looks and acts like the Ergo's past life, the new puppet was made a stalker who looked just like Carlo. This is, of course, the puppet we play as. I wonder then if Pinocchio is designed with freckles and blue eyes instead of the real Carlo's brown eyes and flat complexion to convey that Geppetto is trying to foster an incongruence in Pinocchio with the real Carlo. He wants imperfections in the reconstruction of his personality because the real Carlo's personality was, in Geppetto's words, mischievous. So the lingering question is why? Shouldn't that be enough? Why cause the puppet frenzy? Why was Romeo made the king? While there are many theories surrounding this rather convoluted part of the story you can find online, this is how I interpreted it. Sometime around the creation of Pinocchio, Geppetto started the frenzy in order to throw society into chaos. He did this to give Pinocchio the chance to free the Ergo dispersed throughout Krat's citizens and puppets, and in the process, reawaken to his old life as a human stalker. They could then deal with the alchemists that were collecting the freed Ergo on the Isle and take it for themselves. Geppetto implies this is necessary to return Carlo's reawakened consciousness to an organic body. Additionally, he made the king out of Romeo, another victim of the disease turned to physical Ergo, in order to give the puppets a leader who would command them toward a broad goal to drive the frenzy. This made them easier to control without his own intervention and without garnering suspicion. Judging by this line in the notes about Romeo's creation, which reads, "I hope that the owner of this body finds peace through this revenge," Geppetto's instruction to Romeo was likely to stop the spread of the petrification disease, or the spread of Ergo. Unbeknownst to Romeo, this command included more people than just the alchemists and their monsters. It included civilians who didn't show symptoms of the disease, not yet anyway, but carried Ergo within them due to the Krat populace's overexposure to it. This explains why he seems to think he's protecting humans while simultaneously attacking them. Theorizing aside, for the purpose of this analysis, what's most important is after Simon and Geppetto's Cold War over the Ergo and Krat progresses to its next stage, Carlo is torn from this good influence that was trying to help him realize his hatred was just another way for him to be controlled. Pinocchio, or rather Carlo, learned the truth about Romeo and Geppetto too late. Geppetto has been taken to the Alchemist's Isle, and Romeo is already dead. But perhaps Carlo can still see his friend's wish through, to free himself of manipulation, stop the alchemists, and protect humanity of his own will. In Chapter 17 of Pinocchio, our mischievous puppet gets a nasty cold. The blue fairy tells him the only way to feel better is to swallow some icky-tasting medicine, and so Pinocchio refuses to help himself despite the fairy's warnings. 4 black rabbits burst into the puppet's room carrying a coffin fit just for him, and Pinocchio sees if he doesn't take the medicine, even though it tastes bad, he will die and be taken away in the rabbit's coffin. He swallows the medicine with gusto, and with it, the rabbits depart.
Accept your fate. Death has come for you.
The Black Rabbit Brotherhood is my favorite boss in Lies of P. I think the game's developers might have felt the same way because they dedicated a rematch to the group near the story's end. Earlier in the game, Pinocchio faces the Brotherhood while he's still ignorant to the truth and the invisible threads that control him. Throughout the first fight, it's made clear that the group of stalkers is very close. Regardless, Pinocchio kills the eldest brother of the gang and puts a target on his back for the remainder of the story. In his blind obedience, Pinocchio killed someone else's beloved family, and now he must face their blind rage.
Even if we're just bait to buy time, you're going down.
This emotional rivalry really invested me in the Brotherhood fights, along with the mechanical marvel of them. I adore when Souls-like bosses are as participatory as the fights in Lies of P. When I know who I'm facing and what motivates them, every move feels like the artful progression of a scene and not just the press of a button. In the first fight, the player primarily faces the eldest brother, whose moves are loud, slow, and confident. Clearly, he's the centerpiece of this group. As he's weakened, the siblings join one at a time, and the player has to fight smart and deal with them as they come if they want a manageable fight. The younger siblings' attacks are quicker and more aggressive, and when they drop down to help their brother, his support becomes more infrequent and telegraphed to give them room. Although the player's attention isn't so divided that they can't react to both at once due to the eldest's slow moveset, his attacks are strong and can come from a far distance, so they still must listen and be aware of him, even when he's off screen. In the rematch, the flow of the fight is swapped, and the player faces the 3 younger siblings first. Lies of P doesn't just slap 3 asynchronous movesets in a room and call it a day, though. All of their behaviors are modified around one another and what the others are doing. Yet again, there are readable sound cues for which sibling is about to focus on the player with amplified attacks, while the others support with equally telegraphed range, or strike if you get too close to them. The player is given another choice here. Either they can face the aggroed rabbit while they're most isolated and avoid the other's ranged attacks, or they can attack another, less aggressive rabbit while evading the more powerful sibling. Either way, once they've killed 2 of the 3 younger siblings, the eldest, reanimated by the alchemist's grotesque experiments, bursts from the coffin originally meant for Pinocchio with a reinvigorated yet familiar moveset that makes up the final tense stretch of the fight. That said, group fights are always a precarious balance between challenge and tedium in Souls-likes. That Lies of P's group fight is so good is a testament to just how phenomenal the combat is in the game. The Black Rabbit Brotherhood fights both make use of the limited camera, sound cues, enemy range, and aggro to craft a fight that feels tense and demanding of the player's close attention, as you would naturally feel in a fight with a group of 4, while still being manageable. When I came out on top, it's the fight that made me feel most like a badass for not only overcoming a demanding skill check, but also for showing a formidable rival, the business. With the Black Rabbits dealt with, Carlo travels to the Arch Abbey, where he can finally face Simon and find answers. The Abbey, swirling with the memories of absorbed Ergo on the coast of the Isle, is a marvel. It's the grandest thing the player has encountered thus far, and is accompanied by a swelling, epic orchestra as their journey comes to an end. The final area is a long, arduous test of their strength, and although the spectacle and interconnectivity of Lies of P's level design isn't its strongest suit, I often found myself looking across the sea at Krot, or down at the beach I started on as I climbed the Abbey, and then looking up at the intimidating machinery I was headed toward. It's here, at the end of the game, that Carlo finally encounters Arlecchino in person, and is presented again with the game's first question.
Are you a puppet or a human being?
This time, just like Paul and Dina's quest with the wedding ring, Carlo has learned enough to grow into what was once a lie. He knows now that he is human, with his own will. Afterwards, Arlecchino is the first character to not refer to Pinocchio as Geppetto's puppet, but rather Geppetto's son. The Abbey is full of difficult enemies. Perhaps the most notable of them all is Laxasia the Complete. Like Simon, Laxasia is the result of the alchemist's experiments. She was a victim of the petrification disease modified toward the end of evolution, and she was their greatest success. Only Laxasia was tied to mortality and a want to preserve her individuality due to her adoration of Simon. Don't ask me why. There's a pattern here, one seen in all 4 of the final major fights in Lies of P. Each of them is bound by some form of unrequited obsession, be that love, hate, or the blurry line between the two. Laxasia is widely considered to be the game's most difficult opponent, after all, and love is what drives her, but also what the game says imperfects her. You get a face full of lightning to prove to you how powerful these emotions are when they're taken advantage of. This is true of the Black Rabbit Brotherhood, whose love of their brother and hatred of Pinocchio was being controlled by the alchemists. It's true of Laxasia and her devotion to Simon. Of course, it's true of Simon as well, who, in parallel to Carlo, only hated his father and was driven to such extreme action because he was denied his love. Even the fox and cat fall victim to this manipulation of their strongest emotions. The fox only serves the alchemists because she loves her brother enough to try and treat his disease. We see the 2 of them finally able to cut their ties with the alchemists here, at the peak of the Arch Abbey and at the end of the game. In this climactic finale, not only does the challenge consistently surprise in the ways it forces the player to utilize everything they've learned along their journey, it motivates them through the difficulty with the epic conclusion of everything they've learned from the story. For the final stretch of Lies of P, as the player fights to the climax of the game, Carlo faces aspects of the person, or puppet, he once was, sometimes figuratively, and other times very literally.
It's fine if I'm gone. But be warned. Watch out for Geppetto.
The nameless puppet, Carlo's petrified corpse turned to a hollow shell of puppetry, is the embodiment of Carlo's hatred, driven by a love he desperately wanted but was never given. It's only fitting that this is the last opponent he faces, the last thing keeping him from cutting his strings and becoming human. The nameless puppet's weapon is described as a double-edged sword that can end one's freedom or grant it by cutting the strings of manipulation. Puppets are tied to strings. Humans have cut their own strings. The boy made a choice and became human. Below the ergo absorbed at the peak of the abbey, and below where Carlo defeated Simon, Geppetto waits for Carlo as the pieces fall into place. Carlo's ergo has reawakened inside Pinocchio, the alchemists are leaderless, and with the ergo they collected left behind, Geppetto's plan has succeeded. All that's left is for the player to make one final choice.
I just need the final ingredient. The one that holds your memories and your lifespan. Give me your heart, son.
In this moment, it's easy to view Geppetto as a sympathetic, grieving character just trying to revive his son, and perhaps this is a little true, but I think the undertones of the game clearly state there's more to it than that. If for some reason the player chooses to trust Geppetto with their heart, they never fight the nameless puppet. Instead, they arrive at the bad ending of the game, which parallels the happily ever after of the book. In the original Pinocchio, after the wooden puppet rescues his father from the infamous terrible dogfish, Pinocchio takes on the responsibility of caring for Geppetto and learns to study and work hard to be reliable. The book reads, "Boys who love and take good care of their parents when they are old and sick deserve praise, even though they may not be held up as models of obedience and good behavior. Keep on doing so well, and you will be happy." At that very moment, Pinocchio awoke and opened wide his eyes. What was his surprise and his joy when, on looking himself over, he saw that he was no longer a marionette, but that he had become a real live boy. Pinocchio ran to the mirror. He hardly recognized himself. The bright face of a tall boy looked at him with wide-awake blue eyes, dark brown hair, and happy, smiling lips. This excerpt describes almost exactly the real boy ending of Lies of P. The most notable difference is Carlo's, quote, wide-awake blue eyes, which in the game belong to Pinocchio instead. If we're to consider eyes as windows into the soul, perhaps this is the game's way of saying that Carlo's true soul lies in his mechanical body, with its eyes the same bright blue that's associated with ergo. We're shown in this ending that Carlo is nothing like he was when he was alive. He's been altered to a shadow of what he was, and still with no will of his own. Seeing as the characters in Hotel Krat learned the truth of the puppet frenzy, Geppetto makes the new Carlo kill his old friends, and then replaces them with disturbing puppet versions of themselves. In direct contrast to the book, Carlo being revived as human is clearly framed as an undesirable, anticlimactic ending, in which the player's whole journey was for naught, and Carlo is never freed from the puppet string. But no one actually makes that choice. Not unless they're trying to get Lies of P's platinum trophy. In the true ending of the game, the player refuses Geppetto's offer to make them into a real boy and faces the nameless puppet, who Geppetto orders to take Carlo's heart by force. The spectacle alone is telling enough. The player isn't simply fighting a machine being controlled, they're fighting a human being with its heart, its mind, its very eyes and mouth removed, dependent entirely on the literal strings pulling it. Then, when those strings are cut, all it can do is be led by its emotions and lash out in unrestrained jealousy and hatred. Above the arena, the ergo collected by the alchemists recounts to Carlo everything he's learned on his journey from puppet to human. Eugenie, Vanini, Antonia, Romeo, even Simon. Carlo is reminded of all the people he's learned about and learned from in turn. When the player first refuses to comply with Geppetto, in his frustration he says,
"I suppose Carlo was mischievous. It seems you inherited his personality instead of his memories."
But what he doesn't understand, or is rejecting, is that memories and experiences, positive and negative, are what shape who you are. They're what inform you about the world and the people around you. This is referenced in the quote from Antonia, which the ergo recounts to the player during the fight.
"The passion of those days is long gone, but I still dream of those memories. Time Time and the memories that fill it are all we have.
It's not necessarily that Geppetto has an absence of care for his son, but that he expects him to be exactly what he wishes solely on the basis that he is his father, no matter how much wrong he does, or even how much wrong he asks of Carlo. He wants him to be human, but to act like a puppet. There's an element of pride to this, I think, that he feels Carlo's life, and life in general, is his to manipulate. Like his work with Ergo, human lives, that he so eagerly abandoned everything for. He says your freedom is not for you, but for Carlo, but that's not true either, is it? Because we know what happens if you do give Geppetto your heart. Because we're fighting the embodiment of Carlo's neglect and sadness right now, still being controlled. Because we are Carlo, rejecting Geppetto, but he's in such denial of the fact that, as a result of his own actions, his son just can't love him. So it is sort of tragic in a karmic way. When Geppetto dies by the hand of his own creation's jealous tirade, and his last words are, "I'm sorry, son," because even after all this, Carlo still manages to cry for the family he lost, or maybe the family he never had, there's resignation in it. He finally accepts it was his own fault. The original story of Pinocchio encourages kids to always listen to their parents, and teaches the value of parental influence. Although this can be seen as another flipping of expectations between the two stories, in the spirit of this message, which was so important to the original Pinocchio, Lies of P isn't flippant in its portrayal of Carlo and Geppetto's shaky relationship. There's not much room for anyone to feel like Geppetto was actually practicing good parenting that ought to be heeded because he wasn't there to parent. The game takes care to make this scenario as cut and dry as possible. Sadly, neglect and abandonment does exist, the absence of any parenting whatsoever, and I don't think Carlo Collodi was ignorant to that when he wrote Pinocchio. That's something Lies of P does often. There isn't so much a vilification of one means of interaction or another, but instead, what causes most conflict in the game is inaction, a total lack of communication. Hell, the proper ending of the Alidoro and Eugenie questline requires the player to rather ruthlessly murder Alidoro's impersonator. It's their first and only resort. The game doesn't necessarily say this was the right thing to do, though, just that it was what Carlo chose to do, based on what he knew.
You're like a human.
Be it with the secret conspiracy of the corrupt alchemists manipulating an ignorant populace, the removal of Romeo's ability to express himself verbally, Simon's attempts to rid humanity of any need to interact, or Geppetto's abandonment of his child, problems arise when there can be no communication. Without even the ability to practice honesty and deception, or the chance to understand for ourselves what's true and false, and decide what's right or wrong, what more are we than puppets? Just slaves to a greater will, deciding what we can and can't know, with no free thoughts of our own. The crumpled note of an alchemist found in the Grand Exhibition Hall reads, "Ergo hearts connect minds with wavelengths. That transparent fullness where lies cannot exist. Is it the new world order or a forced prison? Maybe I won't be able to think free, laughing in my head or running away." The game's final choice to give Geppetto your heart or refuse is so genius, not only symbolically, but because it recontextualizes the entire game without really needing anything to change. The player has been doing Geppetto's bidding throughout the course of the story, but because of the nature of his plan, even if Carlo wanted to ask questions since Romeo's encrypted message, his good nature would ask that he do what he wants anyway. Carlo does what he's told because it'll save lives, even if doing so serves Geppetto's ends. This final choice is the very first and only chance the player has to meaningfully disobey. You must decide for yourself what this journey has meant to you. Was it of your own will, or was it by the threads controlling you? Of course, you can always choose to remain attached to your strings, but only if Carlo has meaningfully grown, understood the world and people around him, and made his own decisions throughout the game can he finally cut them for good. Lies of P says what's important is that you make these decisions for what you have come to learn and believe. The game trusts the player to make the best choice based on the adventure that has informed them. Get educated, get informed, don't let yourself be manipulated, even by your own preconceived expectations and your own emotions. This is what individuality and humanity looks like. Though there will always be tricks, manipulation, and painful lies we must search through to find the light of the right path, within humanity there is also the beauty and satisfaction of understanding someone, and of being understood in return. Recently, in the realm of storytelling, we've seen an influx in adaptations, be it with remakes, live-action adaptations, anime adaptations. There's a growing disillusionment with the treading of old ground. I feel it too, only in my experience, what's gotten stale isn't the reimagining. To me, what makes or breaks a recreation is an understanding of the original work's purpose. The worst adaptations don't inherently come about from unfaithfulness towards certain details. Rather, the core of a bad adaptation is a disregard of the deeper point. The why, meaning an unsatisfying adaptation can also manifest in the form of over-reliance on the source material, treading the same ground in the same way, without an understanding of why it was that way in the first place. What creates a great adaptation is an understanding of a story's purpose, and how an interpreter can help further that message with their own unique medium to their own unique audience. That's why Lies of P is so refreshing. The game isn't afraid to be different. It uses its very existence as an adaptation to allow its audience to experience the same moral in a new way. Lies of P shows a truly deep understanding and reverence for the source material and original author, which I've never seen done in the same creative, diligent way before. As such, Lies of P is one of my favorite adaptations, in spite of its sheer contrast to the source material, which itself feels like a purposeful nod to the story's original message. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, I should say to leave a like and all that, but what I really want to say is, if you haven't already, give Lies of P a try. I want more passionate creators to have the ability to keep making what they love and what we enjoy, even if they're lesser known. Go give them a thick budget for the sequel. After you're done doing that, also, I recommend reading Pinocchio. It's actually very enjoyable, and I think both things elevate each other. Go to your local library, take out the book, read that shit. Read books with your eyes. Also, if you have any thoughts on my take on the story, or any theories and analyses of your own, please share them in the comments. I would love to read them. That's all. Bye There's one character I just cannot place in this story. One character whose mystery supersedes all the others. What the f is up with Jiminy? Jiminy Cricket. Jimbly Cribbit. I swear to God, there's something important about this guy that the game isn't spelling out. What is he? He isn't a puppet, or is he? I don't fucking know. Why is he connected to the Monad family? Why does he remember the relic of Poop Magoopus? Here's my prevailing theory. So Jiminy is obviously pronounced the same as the cricket from the Disney cartoon, but it's spelled differently, possibly for legal reasons, except it's not that. How is Gemini's name spelled? G-E-M-I-N-I, like Gemini, the constellation. What is the cricket related to, both in the game and the Disney cartoon? Stars. Where did the Relics Angel come from? The stars. Jiminy's memory has been wiped, but he has memories of the ruins beneath Krat, where the angel fell. What if Jiminy is somehow related to the original angel, or like a piece of it? All of Sophia's dialogue about wishing for someone to save Krat and save her and stuff, and the descriptions of the wishing stars and the cube talk about this too.
There was the cube.
Same with Simon's best-selling book trilogy. Jiminy's like an alien. If the DLC or sequel of this game comes out and somehow confirms my theory, you all have to come back to this video and tell me I'm the smartest person of all time, and Venmo me $500 each. Good night!